The meme, the moment, the main character. The Cashmere Outside Tee. Welcome back to another unhinged rant by me, Arlie Knits, and today we're going to talk about my latest pattern, the Cashmere Outside Tee, which is now available on my website. It's also available on Ravelry, and just like everything else in my life, it has a whole backstory. So grab your tea. I've got some hot tea, and by hot tea, I mean this tea. So if you didn't watch my last video, which was how to knit a wraparound cardigan, I would recommend you go do that because it tells a whole backstory of how I got to the Netherlands, how I ended up working in a yarn store, and I'm kind of going to pick up the story right in the middle of that story. About 6 months after I started working at Stephen and Penelope in Amsterdam. So yeah, I had been working at this really famous yarn store for about 6 months at the point that the story of this pattern starts to begin. It was a summery day, around about summer, because it was close to my birthday. And I remember we got a big shipment in, and that shipment was Knitting for Olive compatible cashmere. I had never been anywhere near cashmere in my life. That was by far the fanciest fiber I'd ever laid my little hands on. I'd never looked at it, I'd never squeezed it, I'd never sniffed it, I'd never been so close to this level of elevated luxury. And like I mentioned, it was really close to my birthday when the shipment came in, so the temptation was basically criminal. I remember looking at it, and I hadn't actually at this point spent a lot of money on yarn. I'd been trying really hard not to convert my entire paycheck into fibers, but it was my 40th birthday, which is kind of a special one. And I remember without too much convincing, just basically putting 10 balls into a little basket and checking out the cart. And I don't think I've ever regretted a purchase more or less. We'll see how the story goes. And alongside this was a bit of winter fatigue. So my husband and I had immigrated from South Africa to the Netherlands at the end of September, which basically meant coming from the end of a South African winter and starting in a European winter, which ended up being like kind of 6 months of winter. And if you are from the Netherlands, been to the Netherlands, or know anything about the Netherlands, the summers here are like, whoop, tiny little baby. They're quick, and it takes a really long time for the good weather to set in. And it was around about June, May-June, I remember, and it still was kind of cold. And we were tired, we needed some sun. We needed sun, my birthday was coming up, and we hadn't actually explored Europe at all, having come from the absolute bottom of Africa, like a literal 13-hour flight away. We hadn't really seen anything, and so we decided to go find some sun, and the place we decided to go to for my big 4-0 was Portugal. So I packed my bags, I packed my cashmere, and I thought to myself, you know what would be cute is a little knitted t-shirt. A little cashmere knitted t-shirt for an elevated birthday luxurious self-present. And so that's what I did. I went to Portugal, I cast on my little cashmere t-shirt, and I had a great time. But you know how it goes, right? You end up with a whip, and then you end up with 3 more. But before I knew it, my little cashmere tee had fallen in a pile with all the other whips, and it was just, you know, making friends there, and I was being distracted by life, distracted by yarn, distracted by just all the things, right? And then somewhere along the line, I decided to start my little knitwear design business. That whole backstory is in my last video, and which meant that I needed to have a pattern for all of my whips. I couldn't just be knitting frivolously, having a really nice time, and then show it off to you guys and be like, sorry, no pattern. But then, as stories like to do, it came full circle. And around about January 2026, like just last month, on my rollout for patterns of this year was the Cashmere Outside Tee. So I pulled out my little whip and I dusted her off, and I was almost done actually. I just had some sleeve complications in that the first draft had really dramatic big sleeves, and then I thought to myself that that's really cute, but can you imagine putting a cardigan on over that? It didn't really make sense. So I narrowed that sleeve down to like a little princess poof sleeve, and I finished it up and I tightened up my little pattern, and then I put the finished project in the washing machine to block, the way I have always done before, every time before this. On the cold setting, on the wool setting, I said my little Hail Mary, I walked out the bathroom, I came back, I opened up the washing machine, and my cashmere perfect birthday pattern and my cashmere tee had faltered, she had shrunk, she was tiny, stiff, hard. And I remember having like a total meltdown on the internet. I was like, guys, oh my god, what am I gonna do? And everyone was like, oh, just, block it again and pull it out. And I tried that. It actually got smaller. And then I got some advice that you can just, if you wet it and you just keep pulling at the stitches aggressively, you can probably save it. Well, I did that. And I got some advice that it made a really cute little crop top. And well, you're right, except for the fact that it's like really stiff. I can't stretch this. I can't wear it because my body won't fit into this here little fossilized cashmere crop top. It was honestly one of the most heartbreaking I'm not exaggerating, it was like one of the most heartbreaking moments of my life, and I genuinely entered into all the stages of grief. Initially with denial, I was like, no, I'm gonna be able to stretch this out, because I had faltered things slightly in the washing machine before, but I'd always been able to like just stretch the stitches back into some kind of a recognizable form. And I was in denial for a couple of days, like a good few days of just like really trying to aggressively pull this t-shirt out. I went through rage, like fists at the ceiling rage. I went through intense grief, like long walks in the forests, crying on my own. It sounds dramatic, but it's really true. I went through it all, and then eventually someone commented on one of my posts saying, hey, you could maybe make some cute slippers, and I was like, actually, maybe I could. But in the meantime, it's a pillowcase cover for my cat, because she's a queen and deserves top tier luxury. And in and amongst all of the delusional, chaotic grief, I decided, you know what, I'm going to shoot my shot with Knitting for Olive. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to ask them if they're interested in collaborating. Maybe they can send me some more cashmere, and this time I won't put it in the washing machine. So I sent them an email. I said, hey, ... would you be interested in collaborating on the Cashmere Outside Tee, all of the details? And they got back to me and they were interested, and they sent me 10 balls of their beautiful cream colored compatible cashmere. And I also looked at this as an opportunity to, refine some things that I liked or didn't like about that pattern. For example, well, I really liked those little princess poof sleeves. I actually thought about it a bit longer, and I thought, you know what, this is supposed to be a layering piece. It's meant to be something that you can throw on a cardigan and throw on a jacket, The poofy princess sleeves just weren't it for layering. So I refined the sleeves in a way that's really neurodivergent-friendly, meaning that the bottom of the sleeve actually comes down really low. It's never sitting in your armpit, which is over here. It's right down here. But also equally important, while I want that gaping sleeve, I don't want people looking up and into my armpit. So it needed to be loose but tighter around here. Another detail I refined was where the neckline sits. So I like a lower neckline because I want to be able to breathe, but I don't want my lady lumps free, and I didn't want my lady business just falling out. And so it was important to me that the neckline was just sitting in a good space. Another change I made was that in this year's sad felted little baby version, I used the compatible cashmere held single, and it's a very thin yarn. It's essentially like a thick lace weight or a very, very fine fingering weight yarn. And so I used 2.25 millimeter needles, and yes, I knit a whole t-shirt. And I actually had put it out to the public. I released a poll saying like, would you do that? And a lot of people came back to me saying, no, we would not do that. A couple of you were like, yeah, no, absolutely. It looks like a really good, beautiful t-shirt, lovely drape. I would do that. But a good 95% of you told me I was really crazy. So what I ended up doing with this one that I'm wearing now is I held it double. So 2 strands of compatible cashmere, which arrived at a weight very similar to a sports weight. And I compensated by going up a 0.5 needle size so that my needle was slightly too big, and that gave the fabric back its drape. Here's an example that I'm making in a linen merino blend. So it's a little too big, so it's got the drape without it being invisible. And obviously I blocked it properly this time. Actually, I blocked it with a handheld garment steamer, you know, the kind that you would get creases out of clothes with. So I would recommend anyone working with cashmere do the same. I just popped it on my blocking mat with a towel on top, and I used the steamer and I steamed everything out. And honestly, every time I've worn it, it's just gotten looser and looser and drapier and drapier. So it was a really painful lesson, but I feel like a lot of good things came out from it. And you can learn from my mistakes. Please do, please do. Learn from my mistakes, please. And yeah, like I mentioned, it is already available on Ravelry and on my website. And as per usual, I'm now going to break down the pattern, what it entails, and what you can expect if you buy it. I'm going to be using my sad little felted version as a demo to explain the pattern. And on occasion, like right in the beginning, I will also use this whip so that you can see what I mean. So this pattern, I would say, is good for an advanced beginner to an entry-level intermediate knitter, kind of somewhere in between them. Honestly, if you're just like a really smart, really enthusiastic beginner and you've already mastered doing things like increased stitches, I think you're good to go with this pattern, so I wouldn't be afraid. I have intentionally made the construction very, very simple, easy to do, easy to follow. It's meant to be something that you would knit 5 of. It's meant to be something that you would wear every single day. It's meant to be a wardrobe staple, and it's designed like that. So again, if you have watched any of my other videos, I personally struggle to follow patterns, and I make an effort to write patterns that are really easy to follow and really easy to make and really addictive, like you want to make 10 of them. The sizing goes from an extra small to an XXL. The one I'm wearing now is a small. It is cropped for my little short boxy body. I do have a very, very short waist, meaning that my rib cage is literally sitting on top of my hip bones. Like, I don't have a waist really. It just goes like this. And I find the best way to dress my body is to wear high-waisted things and cropped tops. That's going to be different per body, but you can fix that by going longer. If you have a longer torso, I would recommend you do. You can just keep knitting down until you reach your hips, your hip bones, even below your hip bones. It's really up to you. It is meant to be a little on the square side, but in a hot way. So it's meant to be flattering and it's meant to be drapey. So while I recommend the compatible cashmere, and I really, really do, I also would recommend any soft summery fabrics like silk blends, linen blends, cotton blends, yak, baby alpaca, things like that. Again, I held this one double, but if you use use a thickness equivalent, say a sports weight, then your yardage is going to change. So for example, in the pattern, and I do break down both versions, if you hold it double using cashmere, or if you hold it single using a sports weight equivalent. For example, for this one, the small version in a crop fit, I used 5 balls of compatible cashmere held double. That works out to 600 meters of yarn. If that was a sports weight yarn, for example, that could be 300 meters. For the needles, all the stockinette stitches are done in a 3.5. All of the ribbing is done in A3. And for the neckline only, I recommend casting off in a 2.5. Instructions are as follows. We begin by making panel A, which is like this. You start with a little section over here, and then you begin to knit out some neck stitches, and at a certain point you also begin to knit out your armpit stitches, and you move into the neck a little more aggressively. Panel B is an exact mirror replicate of panel A, so we just do the exact same thing but the other way around. And then we come in for panel B. We pick up all of the shoulder stitches, we cast on these back stitches, pick up shoulder B, and then we knit out the back panel until we eventually start to do some armpit increases. We'll then join and knit it in the round. You will then knit until you're happy with the length, and then proceed to do a 1x1 rib knit border and then a loose bind off. When we're done with that, we're going to come back and pick up all of the neck stitches around here, and we'll go ahead and we'll do a 1x1 rib knit border for the neckline, and then our special bind off. My special bind off just basically makes things a little bit neater. So what I do in particular is, firstly, I go down a whole nother needle size. So we've now dropped down to a 2.5 from a 3.5, the ribbing being in a 3. And then we go ahead and we do our cast off in reverse, meaning I turn my work inside out and I do my bind off in the direction I just came from, on the wrong side. And what that does is it sends all of my bound off stitches to the inside of the collar, and because I'm using a much smaller needle, it holds it in a lot tighter. I would, however, only recommend this technique for the neck. I think that if you did it for the sleeve or for the waist, it would make those stitches far too tight. Once we're done with all that, we're going to come back to the sleeves and we're going to pick up these stitches. What we do is a little different to what else is out there. Not exceptionally different, just really easier and more simplified. So we pick up all of the stitches along the top shoulder, and by all I mean 40. So that's going to be 20 stitches on either side of the shoulder seam. We then take the rest of the stitches around the arm area and we divide those in half per side. So we divide half here, we divide half here, and we're placing a stitch marker at the halfway point. After that, we go ahead and we knit these picked up stitches, and then we skip a stitch, turn around, and from the wrong side we pull back, skip a stitch, turn around, knit back, skip a stitch, turn around, da 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 da. So we're basically picking up every second stitch and we're doing short rows. Once we arrive at our little halfway stitch marker, we're then just going to pick up every second stitch around the armpit. What that does is it's going to make these stitches a lot tighter while keeping these armpit stitches down here nice and loose, so nothing's ever touching the actual skin. But it makes the whole of the sleeve a lot smaller. If that's not for you, by the way, you can compensate by adding more stitches here on the top of the shoulder where we're knitting consistently all of the stitches. Then we simply just knit in the round for about 18 to 20 rows, and then we convert to a 1x1 rib knit, and then we bind off. After that, we will work in all of our loose ends, and then we will proceed to block. I've gone to great care to explain to you exactly how to block cashmere in my pattern. If you don't know, it's just the steamy thing that I explained earlier. I would recommend that. I'm actually scared to get cashmere wet altogether after that horrific experience. Yeah guys, that's my story, and that's my pattern, and yeah. So yeah, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for being a little part of my journey. If you do get this pattern, please do tag me. I really love following your little stories. I love getting to know all of you. I love seeing it in all the different fibers and colors, and I love seeing it on you guys. And if you are still here, if you could go ahead and subscribe, it means a lot to me, and it really does help. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.